In society, when we think of plastics, we think of single use. We think of packaging. In South Africa, only 48% of plastic is actually used in packaging applications.
We have recycled more than 28.4% of what we put on the market, compared to the international standard of between 9 and 12% of being recycled. So,
how is plastics actually addressing some of the national challenges that we have as a country? In food security, in water security.
We are a very effective recycling nation where circular economy is actually practiced. But you need to see that in the context of a broken system. In South Africa, we sit with about 3 million people that don't have access to drinking water.
What if I told you that plastics could actually be the hero when it comes to water security in South Africa?
The future of water in South Africa is accessible and available to all South Africans.
Well, welcome to the Safripol Water Security Engagement Forums. As always, I'm your host, Michael Avery, where we go beyond the taps and we turn to some of the science and the stories and the innovations that are driving water security in South Africa. Now, for the longest time, I think plastics has been cast as the villain in the environmental piece. It's always in the environmental memes. But what if I told you that plastics could actually be the hero when it comes to water security in South Africa and in addressing many of our water security and infrastructure challenges that we do face in the country? Well, that's what we're going to unpack today, and it's a great pleasure to welcome. Firstly, we've got Anton Hanekom, who's an Executive Director at Plastics SA and a leading voice in how we think about using plastics responsibly. So, Anton, great to have you on the podcast. And Avashnee Chetty, who is head of Safripol Sustainability Initiative. So, Avashnee, I've come to know you as someone who thinks very deeply about how we think about plastics from a circular economy perspective. So it's great to have you on the podcast and just to talk about some of these innovations. And maybe we can kick off on that note, because I think there is a great misconception around plastics in South Africa. And a lot of that has come down to activism that has tried to cast this particular light on plastics. And so in the consumer's mind, plastic is the ultimate environmental evil. How do you view the perception around plastic in South Africa?
Yeah, no, thank you, Michael. And thank you for having myself. I'm very excited about this conversation and to have it with Anton as well. So yeah, that's a very important point to kick off this discussion. I think in society, when we think of plastics, we think of single-use applications. We think of packaging. And it's interesting, in South Africa, only 48% of plastic is actually used in packaging applications. So the vast majority even is outside of that application. But the general consensus is that plastic is used in short-lived single-use applications, and this is then linked to pollution. Unfortunately, that's not the full picture.
Yeah. So less than half, in fact,
yes.
is being used in single use. Where is the majority of plastic used then?
Right. So the conversations we actually are not having is how is plastic contributing to durable, long-term applications, for example, in infrastructure, in building, in electronics. How is plastics actually addressing some of the national challenges that we have as a country? In food security, the conversation we're having today, in water security. Those are the conversations that I think we as society are not having. And that is why plastic is having this negative perception and the negative rhetoric around it.
And so from Plastics SA's perspective, I mean, you've had to confront this perception for a long time. And I think there is, to Avashnee's point, a large gap in public awareness around how plastic is actually used more broadly. Where do you think the biggest gaps are in the public perception around plastic as a material and, you know, the benefits as well that plastic has in society? I saw a great video the other day about, you know, plastic being used in blood sachets in hospitals. And if, you know, think about if we didn't have that, if we didn't have plastics, I wouldn't be able to have this little device with me here today. It is such a widely used material.
I think the negative narrative is very often coming from the visibility of plastics in the environment. So we see it and then we say, oh, plastics is bad. And without being, Avashnee's point, being specific of what we're referring to, we just use the term plastics, and then we want to deal with plastics, and we forget about the benefits and effects. So I agree, there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around the benefits of plastics and actually where we are using plastics. It's not just packaging, which is often the problem. It's in all these other infrastructure. It's in transport. It's automotive. It's healthcare. You refer to blood bags and things. So it's everywhere. The problem is that it's visible. Other materials sink. Other materials you don't see. So I think that have created this negative narrative to say, but plastics is bad. Social media, I think, is part of raising this unnecessary tag of plastics being the villain in the process. Because if you open it, every second articles around the negativeness and the hazardousness and the concerns around it, which in fact it's not true. The fact is that if you look at plastics, and if you deal with it responsibly, it's probably the most environmentally fit for purpose product and material that exists. But then you need to deal with it correctly. At the end of the life, you need to make sure that it's collected, it's properly sorted, it gets recycled, and reused in another product. Maybe just interesting stats, in last year, 2024, we have recycled more than 28.4% of what we put on the market, compared to the international standard of between 9 and 12% of being recycled. So we are a very effective recycling nation where circular economy is actually practiced. But you need to see that in the context of a broken system as well. We don't have proper waste management systems in South Africa. 39% of our population don't have access to waste management infrastructure or service. So nobody's collecting the waste. Nobody is taking it away. So what do they do with it? They have to rely on their own means. It's either illegal burning it, or they just dump it out of the car window, or they throw it in a river because it's gone. We've created a job for somebody else, which never happens. That's not the case. But we lead to pollution, we lead to waste being in the environment, and that gives us the negative perception, and we say plastics is bad, which is not the case.
So, I mean, from Safripol's perspective, Avashnee, how much of this labeling of plastics as the villain in the environmental piece is fair, and where do you see the big gaps?
I want to frame it like this. Just because you're using a sustainable material doesn't make it sustainable. So I can take a biodegradable material, for example, and just throw it. It could leak into the environment. I could throw it into landfill. That doesn't make it a sustainable solution.
Why?
Because you haven't treated it properly at end of life. Right. So a biodegradable, compostable material has to go to a composting facility where it's processed under specific conditions to enable its biodegradation. In South Africa, we don't have industrial composting facilities to enable the use of these kinds of materials. So therefore, putting biodegradable materials on our market is not going to provide us with a sustainable solution. We need to think of beyond just the material. We need to think, what are we doing with this material at end of life? And if we're not treating it properly in terms of its intended end use application and how it should be managed, then it's unsustainable. So I don't think we can have a conversation of just plastics without talking about end-of-life management of it.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Without talking about human behavior and the systems that need to be in place, education, awareness that taking place. Very often we change products, we change things without thinking about the impact of that in terms of the broader value chain and the circular economy. But we're also not educating our consumers around, we've made a change and what do you need to do with it? And how do you need to deal with this responsibly at the end of the day? So I think the word responsibly, we like to think of the plastics industry as a responsible industry. We do the right things. We're constantly looking at how we improve what we're doing to ensure end-of-life solutions and recyclability and to make sure that the circular economy is taking place. But it doesn't stop with the industry. I think brand owners, retailers, consumers, everybody has a role within this responsibility.
On that point, and I do think it's fair to say that the plastics industry has taken the lead here, partly because there's a lot of public pressure, partly because it's been cast as the villain of the piece, but also because there's an understanding that you have to do things differently because of the impacts of those that are seen in the environment. And so I think from that perspective, it's an industry that other substrates could probably learn a lot from. But I still think from a brand owner's perspective or from maybe a retailer's perspective, there's a lot of education that still needs to happen. I still see these compostable plastic bags that seem on the surface like a good idea. Oh, I've got something that's biodegradable as a plastic bag. But if that plastic bag, Anton, ends up in a waste stream, a plastic recycled waste stream, you can't really then use that if you want to for something like a pipe that'll carry water because it'll biodegrade. Yeah. How much of a challenge is that?
It is quite a big challenge. At the moment, because of the volumes that's on a lower side, one can probably accommodate that within the recycling process. But we see more and more of these bags and things being added to the market, which create the problem. The question is, if the manufacturer, I need to give a guarantee is that this won't leak and it won't allow water into your system or your house. And now suddenly you have no guarantee of what's the material that's been used for you to produce your product. Then where does the responsibility end? So I think very often the consumers have certain expectations. They put pressure on the brand owners, retailers, who make changes without thinking through the whole value chain, without consulting the whole value chain to say, we plan to do the following, what will be the impact on recycling or on end of life, and how do we deal with it? So very often they introduce changes, nobody knows about it, and it ends up that we cannot deal with it. Just on multi-layers, while we're on this topic, multi-layer packaging, things like your muesli bags and so on.
Or a little juice bottle. I mean, I've got two daughters aged 10 and 8, and they love those little juice bottles. But, there's some plastic, there's some foil, and there's some fiber in all of that.
There's also a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around that, like chips packets, that there's foil in a chips packet. It's not. It's 100% polyprop material. It's a metallized film inside. So if we bother to collect it or put it out in your recycling bag, it will be recycled with the other polyprop material. Coming back to multi-layers, we've made changes. Now it's a monomer material, but still multi-layers. But nobody has bothered to communicate that at the sorting facility or material recovery facility, the conveyor is moving at a speed. They've been trained to say these sort of bags is not recycled currently in South Africa. So even with the new things that are recycled and recyclable, it's not picked because that training and awareness has not gone through the process.
So Anton, let's just bring it back into the real world applications of plastics in our water infrastructure. And we know we have a desperate situation in South Africa, amongst the 30 driest countries in the world. Our pipes are leaking, they're aging, we haven't been investing sufficiently. Where and how is plastic actually used in South Africa's water infrastructure? And what are some of the key advantages that plastics offer?
Plastics in general first forms the backbone of our economy. It's really part of every economic sector in South Africa, so it's absolutely critical from that side. If we look at water infrastructure, water security, major infrastructure, pipelines and even buildings, new factories all use predominantly plastic piping, either for fresh water, to get water into the system, for reticulation, for sewage, for stormwater and so on. So it plays a big role within that. Some of the benefits of plastics and plastic pipes within that, and I think it's critical that we need to say that in South Africa we have very specific pipe standards with SABS, but there's also an industry body that drive quality and do audits around pipe standards. So it's absolutely important that when we do use plastic pipes in infrastructure projects, for example, that it does meet the standards. We've seen a lot of products being imported We see donation from our friends in the East that is not always meeting the standard and that we can't use. So there's a sensitivity around that. But plastics in pipes and in infrastructure, one benefit is it has a long service life. Plastic pipes can be underground for 50 to 100 years.
Wow.
It's a long period, so it is, from that perspective, very economically, very efficient. It is resistant to chemicals, so it won't rust. It is resistant in terms of hazardous and hard materials within the water. Also, the smoothness of the pipe inside means that your water flow easier through the pipe. People don't think about it, but it will save energy, it will save cost in terms of pumping water through the system compared to other materials. Plastics have proved over and over that it is a better alternative or better material than the old traditional materials that we used, without going into that sort of details. In terms of maintenance, because it's long-lived, it's resistant, it's puncture-proof, and when we seal it, we weld the plastic pipes together. The big pipes, a lot of people don't know that you can weld plastic pipes.
And so fascinating that you can weld plastic. It's not something that you would ordinarily think of. I mean, you don't think of steel welding or that kind of thing. But I've also heard that you can, when you're reinstalling plastic pipes, you can insert the new pipe into the existing pipe, or there are advantages when it comes to the installation process as well.
Very often with our maturing infrastructure, with cement pipes and steel pipes, because of corrosion and things, it leaks. So there are technology available that you can either line the inner of a steel pipe with plastic, or you can insert a plastic pipe that will fit into that diameter. You can insert that into the existing pipe. So it prevents you from digging up everything at a huge cost. Remember, sometimes the pipes is under road surface and things. So you need to find ways to be able to repair those old infrastructure with something new. So it is possible to either line the existing pipeline or to insert a new plastic pipe in the existing infrastructure.
So you can use big ones here. You're not just talking, because I think a lot of people will be aware of plastic around their home. Yeah. How well do they do under pressure situations for bulk water?
Well, bulk water, you're looking at pipes, it's high-performance pressure pipes, bigger wall thickness, and you're looking at diameters of 1.2 meters in certain materials, others up to 600 millimeters. So it's a fair-sized pipes. And a lot of the work that's been done is to improve the material so that you have thinner walls. Your inside diameter is actually then bigger and more water can flow through for the same size. But yeah, at the end of the day, the benefits are huge for plastics. And because you can seal it so well, we looking at water leakage, and you look at Johannesburg with 35% water leaks taking place.
Yeah.
If you put plastics in, that will help to stop that process.
Yeah, and Michael, just to add to this, I mean, Safripol has a highly technical and engineered HDPE resin that's used for high pressure pipes in South Africa, and we're the only producer of that material.
Wow.
So, and I mean, this material is highly technical, highly engineered, and in most cases, it's far superior than the legacy materials used for pipes and pipe systems. So if you look at some of the legacy materials like asbestos cement, steel, those materials are prone to leaks, prone to corrosion, and that's why you need such a high investment in terms of maintenance. And if you look at now, our infrastructure is aging. Yeah. So most of those pipes that's already in the ground needs to be replaced.
Yeah, so we need to really be thinking about what we're replacing them with for the long term. But actually, when it comes to circularity, then, I mean, we're probably talking 50, 100 years' time when you're going to come then and replace that pipe. Could that pipe then be recycled again?
So firstly, it's the ideal material and the ideal application for plastics. Imagine producing it once, and it gives you a life cycle of over 50 to 100 years. You never need to worry about it. Pollution is never a factor in that discussion. And that is the real sustainability opportunities we have for plastics. It's placing them in these durable, long-lived applications. That's really adding value. It's meeting the specifications in terms of being fit for use for those applications. And it's giving you value for money. In terms of maintenance, you're going to have low costs because actually plastic pipes has one of the lowest leakage rates. So your local municipalities are not going to have to worry to put funds and money towards removing the pipes and reinstalling new materials. It's going to give you a service life that's going to be outlived.
When it comes to, I know there's a big concern in the public about chemicals leaking from plastics or leaching from plastics. What is the risk of that if you're talking about a plastic pipe that's going to be used in water reticulation, for example? I don't know who wants to pick that up.
So maybe I can just, what I want to say is if you look at the plastic pipe, and Anton spoke about this, it's going to give you a service life of 50 to 100 years. So this material is it's very tough, highly durable. It is not eroding. If there was any sign of degradation, you're not going to be able to use it for that long in its intended application. So already that's indicating that there will be no leakage in that application. And as Anton also pointed out, I mean, these materials are so technical. They are specified for water reticulation according to the highest standards. And this is not only SABS, but it also conforms to ISO standards for potable water use. So these materials have been tried and tested and in service for more than 50 years.
It's a surprise to me to hear that, firstly, we're a continental leader when it comes to producing these, and that we have this opportunity when it comes to our water security to really think over the long term to the next 50, 100 years based on the decisions we're going to make today to replace a lot of this aging infrastructure. So I hope we're having these conversations with the powers that be as well. But Anton, I mean, for those outside the sector, what do you think might be the most surprising use or application or advantage of plastics when it comes to bulk water infrastructure or any water infrastructure for that matter?
Well, I think we've raised the issue around of the long life, service life of plastic pipes. I don't think a lot of people know that you can use it for 50 to 100 years. And yes, maybe in 100 years we have different solutions to deal with the pipes when it comes out of the ground because it will need cleaning and so on.
So there's been a lot of scientific studies done that actually indicates plastics has a lower environmental impact than most alternative materials. And this is also true in water security applications. So typically to produce a plastic pipe will require less energy for production as compared, for example, to its steel counterpart.
Right. And
if you look at lower energy for production, it means cost savings there, as well as transport costs to actually get this huge plastic from the production facility to the site.
Yeah, so the whole life cycle.
So it's lightweight, and lightweight is a significant advantage when it comes to materials and implementation of materials in various applications. So you're saving not only on energy, you're saving on transport costs. It has a lower environmental impact in terms of water use for the production. So there's a lot of environmental indicators where plastics is far superior than alternative materials on the market.
Again, it's about exploding the myths and the perceptions versus the reality, because sadly, the myths tend to propagate themselves. But when you actually interrogate them, you see that as a material, as a substrate, plastic was developed as an innovative solution to some of those problems from 10, 20, 30 years ago that we're now at risk of repeating here. Just talk to me about the social and economic multiplier here, Avashnee, because if you look at the entire value chain, and you're just talking from manufacture to transport to installation, maintenance, what kind of jobs and local economic impacts are enabled by plastic infrastructure?
I think it's significant, especially in the space of water security. So if we look at resin manufacturing, South Africa has capability for local manufacturing of these plastic resins that goes into the plastic pipes, or even for water storage. We didn't even have, speak about water storage, where plastics plays a significant role in enabling water storage, especially if you look at the population in South Africa that does not have access to potable water. Water storage solutions for them in terms of 25-litre buckets, in terms of water storage tanks, our JoJo tanks, those are all making a very positive contribution towards making water accessible for that part of our communities that don't have access.
That's an important point. And Anton, when we talk about the South African context, I think tanks and storing water is becoming increasingly critical for not only consumers, but large businesses as well. I was chatting to a listed REIT the other day on one of my shows, and they've installed huge tanks at one of their shopping malls because they've got to shut down if there's a water outage and their shoppers, their tenants can't go and use the toilets, for example.
I think we just need to go back to day zero in Cape Town a couple of years back, and what was the result of that? We've seen households installing, people were urged to do that, to install water tanks at their homes, to connect it to the gutters and things to harvest rainwater, to have that connected again to their households for grey water, to the toilets and showers and things. But that's just one part, is the tanks and so on. The whole value chain, you need to look at all the couplings, all the pumps that goes with it. There's water purification systems that need to be put in if you want to use your tank water for drinking or for showering and so on. So yes, there's definitely a multiplier in terms of the economy, both socially and economically, in terms of doing it. It creates jobs. Obviously, industry will be busier making more tanks and pipes and things, but you create more people that will install it, more jobs, more positions around that. And I think so. Gauteng is going in the same direction. If you look at the water leakage and so on, is that it's serious that people, if you talk to people around you, how many people are actually putting in water tanks? You refer to companies. I think we've now solved the electricity problem by putting up solar and generators. Water is a serious issue, and what do you do as alternative? You need to pot it up. You need to make it available for. I think about malls and things. How do you do it if you don't have a proper system? And that's where plastics play a role. We heard that it's cheaper, it's more flexible, it's lightweight, it's easier to install. It just makes more sense with the benefits that goes with plastics within the system.
Avashnee, you drive around Johannesburg now and it's solar on the roof and the little green or red tank on the side of the house.
This means that it's a significant investment that's made not just only for rural communities, but for suburbs that we all are living in, because that water shedding is going to be significant, and it's going to be coming. It's going to be the next crisis that we as South Africans are going to have to face. And plastics is giving us solutions to address potential day zero.
Talk to me about the rural opportunity, though, because I'm aware that Safripol has partnered with Africa Tanks, I think, in KZN. And, it's so interesting to hear about some of the work that some NGOs like the Gift of the Givers are doing in drilling boreholes and then installing one of these plastic water tanks, which is helping communities in some instances which haven't had water for years.
Exactly. I mean, these are the communities that we are not speaking about, and they don't have access to potable water. So we need to have decentralized solutions that is serving these communities. And what better way than, drilling a borehole, having a JoJo tank, doing rain water harvesting, so that water is accessible. And plastics also enables to keep it clean for a longer storage life. I mean, you can keep the water in your JoJo tank for up to 6 months. And it's free from contamination, free from microbes. It's still safe for use.
So if you think through the whole value chain, we talked about plastics is lightweight, it's cheaper to produce, it's easier to transport. You're talking rural areas, so there's huge distances. So it's easier to get products down to that community. In South Africa, we sit with about 3 million people that don't have access to drinking water. So there's a huge opportunity. Industry have the capacity to scale up. We have spare capacity to produce more. So it does come back to infrastructure projects and things and say, but is there political will to deal with this issue? And how do we do that?
On that point then, Anton, I mean, how informed is government of this opportunity and of the ability of plastics to play this critical role? And the fact that you've got the capacity spare right now, and at this time when we talk so much about infrastructure, it's in every budget that we're going to turn South Africa into a construction site. Are you seeing alignment, or is more education needed?
I think we hear about all these projects in infrastructure. We don't necessarily see the implementation of that. So we need that political will to take place. So coming back to your question, does government know about this? There's a lot of advocacy going on. There's a lot of meetings with government on national level, municipal, provincial level, municipal level. There's a lot of education awareness taking place around water and the wider plastics industry as well. A couple of years back, pipe specifically was designated as part of the provincial procurement policy framework. With the new administration coming in, that have fallen away or has been we need to go through the process again, bottom line. So we're now again in the process of making sure that it is designated plastic pipes, which means that when there are infrastructure development taking place, even in roads and things, there's piping that run underneath that.
Yeah.
That when the constructor or the contractor is procuring this material, is that they look at local production. So we need to look at localisation for our economic growth, but that they procure from that. So they're aware of it. There are initiatives to make it happen. I think definitely public-private partnerships needs to play a much bigger role. There needs to be much more collaboration taking place. At the end of the day, I think sometimes the political will to make sure a project is planned and things, but to get it implemented and delivered on time, it's critical. If we can do that in the rural areas, we can get water, running water, clean, safe water to everybody. And we talk water on the one hand, but it deals with sewage on the other side as well.
Yeah.
I think 14 million people in South Africa doesn't have access to basic sewage systems.
How many?
So we already 14 million.
14 million.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It's a huge number. And then often you hear about stories like in the public education system, schools that still have pit latrines, for example, and you wonder, how can this be, Avashnee, in 2025 when we've got the solutions, we've got the capacity, we've got, the business will, and one certainly hopes that we start to see some of that government will coming through.
I think when it comes to government, yes, there is awareness, but a lot more can still be done. And if you look at the policy discourse, it's still very much focused on pollution, on plastic pollution. So, and Anton, if you look at the whole United Nations plastic treaty, it's focused on how do we end plastic pollution. Which, yes, is correct. We need to look at that. And, as a society, as a government, as industry, we need to move towards eradicating plastic pollution because it's far too valuable to end up as pollution.
Yeah.
We need to be starting having discussions about what are the opportunities that can be unlocked if we look at plastics in the context of infrastructure. And that's where I think a lot more can be done from a governmental policy perspective in terms of national planning. And as, Anton mentioned, implementation. And it needs to be part of government tenders at the local municipality levels. Most of these tenders for, new infrastructure projects is still focused on legacy materials, because that is what we know as a society. So there needs to be changes made. From the specifications, for example, if you look at water infrastructure, the specifications currently, I think, is more in support of legacy materials.
And those legacy materials, if you look at our aging pipe infrastructure,
Exactly.
you're talking 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago, some of these materials were used.
Yeah.
Technology, the world has moved on since then. How do either of you know how close we are to having that designated again, having had to start from the beginning again? Anton, I don't know if you know.
We quite far in advance in the process, so we hope to get that hopefully this year still in place. It's critical. But that's just one material for one type of infrastructure, and we're talking water security. We sit with other infrastructure problems as well, potholes and things. You can use plastic waste in part of the mix with bitumen to fill those potholes. We're looking at ways of waste that's been collected, provided we fix the broken system and can get a waste collected from households and at a central place where you can properly sort it. We can do a lot of beneficiation of that material for the community, the benefit of the community, housing, infrastructure, just daily products. So plastics absolutely sit with this potential and this benefit to the community. Instead of thinking, see the pollution out there, let's see why it's there and how can we fix it, how can we stimulate the circular economy and make sure that the value of plastics, which is it's long, it's durable, we can bring it back and reuse it. How do we stimulate and grow that, and how do we make that work to the benefit of the population, to the communities?
I think another important aspect that sometimes is often missed is the water-food nexus and the role that plastics plays in that. I mean, if you just look at plastics being used for irrigation, drip irrigation, a significant contribution there. Plastics used in agricultural shade nettings to improve the efficiency of the crops, which then reduces the water consumption for the plant growth.
Yeah, and as we know, agriculture consumes 60% of our water resource.
Exactly. The more food we're growing, the more water we're consuming. And as we mentioned, South Africa is a semi-arid country. We're water scarce. So we need to conserve water for our basic needs like agriculture. And plastics plays a meaningful role in that area.
Just a quick example of the food and food waste and the benefit of plastics around that. If you take a cucumber and the thin 5 grams of plastic layer around that, it extends the shelf life of that cucumber with 2 weeks.
Wow.
Research has shown that if that cucumber gets wasted, the cost, the resources used to produce that small layer of plastic film, it's 10 times less the resources used to grow that cucumber. 10 times less than the resources used to create that specific
But that's why
packaging.
we need life cycle analysis and not kind of hunches and gut feels and vibes when we approach these things. And it frustrates me often when you have this mischaracterization of plastic as the villain, because we're not thinking holistically. But at least we're having these conversations and we're starting to at least educate people to the benefits and to the kind of flawed thinking when it comes to the use of plastics in packaging, for example. I think there was a very interesting study done several years ago. Tony Allen won the Stockholm Water Prize for embedded water, and thinking about the water component in our food crop and how much we're actually a net exporter of water. If you look at our agricultural exports, even though we're among the 30 driest countries in the world, is that the right strategy? But certainly what we should be doing is thinking, Avashnee, about food waste and how do we prevent food waste? And plastic has an important role to play here. Where would you say we are on the innovation curve when you talk about these kinds of circular economic models and thinking in South Africa?
I think, and Anton spoke about it, as a country, we're actually quite advanced. And when we look at the circular economy, in some areas we are actually excelling. If you look at PET, for example, as a significant contribution to the beverage industry, we've got bottle-to-bottle recycling in South Africa. That some countries in the West actually are still sitting with a 9% recycling rate. We are taking the PET bottle and giving it several new lives so that it comes back into the industry. We're definitely making a lot of progress. And even if you look at water tanks, for example, and plastic containers, there's a drive towards including recycled content in those materials, in the middle layer where it's not making contact with the actual water. So there's definitely a lot of progress in terms of recycling, firstly, improving our recycling rates as a country, and then including recycled content into the end-use applications. And this would be post-consumer recycled content or post-industrial recycled content.
Let's flip it. What's holding us back? Because it seems that there is a very strong case to be rethinking the way we use plastic in infrastructure, in large-scale infrastructure projects. Is it just the procurement regulations? Is there anything else? Is it maybe cost perceptions? Is it greenwashing? Is there anything else holding us back, Anton?
I think very often it's a lack of understanding and awareness of what is really plastics and the benefit. We tend to lend our ears out to all the negative stories, and we tend to see the turtle with a straw in his nose. And that shaped our thinking without really sitting down and say, but if we make plastics the villain, then what's the impact on me? I won't be able to drive my car. I won't have a cell phone. I won't have a laptop. I won't be able to go to the hospital with proper health devices or applications there. It goes on and on. We talk about water security. Are we really thinking about plastics and water? I think we don't see that link often.
Yeah.
So yes, it's part of education, part of creating awareness. And maybe we should, as an industry, talk more about that, but also equally the brand owners and retailers and everybody else in the process. But I think we need to be open to hear the facts, understand that, and make it part of our lives as well. Procurement in itself won't solve the problem. Remember, we're procuring not a plastic bottle or a PET bottle, we procure water, which happens to be in the bottle. So plastics is very often the intermediate container or packaging or product that we are using. But we need to see the bigger picture around that. So I think a political will support. We keep on talking about localization. We talk about new investments in the industry and things, and then we hamper those initiatives by other policies that doesn't make sense. So we need to help the industry make sure that we get investments. We need to, for South Africa, with a small market, make sure there's support for exports, but also the imports, that we limit that to some extent for what we need. If we can produce it locally, let's create new businesses, new jobs, and let's produce it locally.
Yeah. I think there needs to be more done in terms of consumer education. I mean, we know markets are driven by what consumers want. And, if they look at a plastic bottle versus a glass bottle, or, the inclination, without looking at the science and what the data is saying, is that maybe the alternative is better. But once you unpack and look at a life cycle analysis, for example, and look at what are the impacts, what is the energy requirements, we're not speaking about that. And that's where, from a manufacturing perspective, that's where it really costs business money. If you're saving on electricity, because your material requires less energy for production, you're saving on water requirements, it makes business sense.
So whose responsibility is that to play a role in better educating the consumer? Because we were having a chat before we came into the studio about coffee pots that look good on the label. It said these are compostable, but there was no further education about how to do that. Should I be taking that back into a facility that has compostable, specialization, or can I just toss it into the home composter, that kind of thing? Is it the brand owner? Is it the retailer? Who takes the lead? Because often it comes down to education.
It does. And I think it's a joint responsibility of all the players in the value chain. A brand would be irresponsible to put a coffee pot on the market without clearly stipulating what do I as a consumer do at end of life. When I'm done with my coffee, do I just put it in my waste bin? Or where is the nearest composting facility? I mean, even it cannot be recycled. It needs to go to a dedicated facility. So there needs to be communication and education across the value chain up until it reaches the consumer. And even beyond the consumer, when it gets to the waste reclaimer, what does the waste reclaimer do when he picks up this material? Does it go into the recycling stream or does it go to landfill? So there needs to be communication at every step of the value chain. And what's interesting about plastics, it's a very lengthy value chain.
Yeah. Well, describe it for me quickly.
So it starts with ourselves, like the resin producer, just producing the pellets that actually goes into a conversion facility. So the next step would be the plastic converters, and they would typically convert a product for a brand owner. And the brand owner either then distributes directly to market or via a retailer. And then at the retailer, that's where you and I as consumers are purchasing the product. And now we have the product in our hands. What do we do at end of life? There needs to be clear communication, on-pack labeling that clearly tells me, does this go into is it currently being recycled in South Africa? Should I put it into my recycling stream or not? And actually putting something that's not recyclable into your recycling stream adds more cost and steps for the recycler because now he has to separate this and now it becomes part of his waste stream.
In the current scenario, with a broken system, if we put everything in one bag or two bags, organic, and everything that can be recycled in another bag. I'm coming back to a chips packet, sweet wrappers. Can be recycled. But because of the size, the current system is the waste picker will not bend down 1,000 times to pick up a sweet wrapper or chips packet to get a kilogram that he can sell.
Yeah.
So if everything goes to a central place, it will be sorted, and then we will sit with these products that is difficult to recycle at the moment. Because there's then volume that you can deal with, then it's easier to find end-of-life solutions because you have the volume, you can do better trials and things around that. So yes, we sit with a current scenario, but also a future scenario, and it's how do we play through that. But coming back, I think your question is, everybody has a role to play. This is a partnership. This is not industry or retailers or government. I think we need to take hands and say, how do we make this work at the end of the day throughout the whole value chain? Because it's so lengthy and everybody has a different role to play. If you change something, communicate that through the value chain. Beforehand, say this is what we plan. How will it work? What will be the impact even on the waste picker, the collector at the end of the day? And how do we make sure that in terms of design for recyclability or end-of-life solutions is that we design the products so that when it comes to the end of life, there is a solution for that and we can keep it back in the circular economy and make sure we are a sustainable industry and consumers for that matter.
Just to bring it back to the infrastructure component, I mean, and it's great to hear that I, as the end user, have a role to play here, because I think it's very empowering when you frame it like that. Often, I think end users feel a little bit left out of the conversation, yet the key in this whole value chain. Businesses as well. I mean, if you're in agriculture, if you're in construction, what role do I have to play, Avashnee, if I'm a farmer, if I'm a contractor in construction, to help push in the right direction so that we can take advantage of this opportunity to use plastics in an industrial scale to future-proof our infrastructure?
We need to make the right decisions. I mean, business has purchasing power. We need to really think about our procurement and the materials that we are actually putting into our business. And those decisions should not just be based on the lowest price. It should be based on where is this material coming from? What happens at end of life? Is it a sustainable option? Are there alternatives that are locally produced that probably perform the same or if not better? So when it comes to purchasing from a business perspective, we have a choice. And, the farmer needs to consider, in terms of water security or irrigation, what are the options available on the market?
Yeah.
What is cost effective but still beneficial and can provide me with the benefits that you're looking for in terms of agriculture. So there's a lot of choices that can be made. Unfortunately, a lot of them are misinformed. And that's where the challenge comes in.
It's thinking through the process. And circular economy, it's newer terms that have been used, but the practice has been ongoing for a long time. But you talk about the farmer. So if I use a 20-litre pesticide drum, what do I do at the end of the day when I've used the chemicals? What do I do with it then? How does the person that sell it to me, how does he get involved? So what's the closed loop opportunities that we have to get those materials back and to do something else with it? So it's really taking hands and take a product and think through the process and see how do we deal with it. We have millions of products, so it's a difficult process. It's not easy just to take. But I think that's the thinking is in the value chain, how do we make sure the materials coming back can be recycled and can be reused in another long, durable life product at the end of the day that will give us all the benefits of plastic.
And to stop demonizing plastic. And I think that often retards the progress that we could be making. Because to your earlier point, we're focused on one component of an industry that is far larger, has far more use in an industrial level, in infrastructure, to just be focusing on one component of the broader industry. Avashnee, I've got to ask you, as we're ending off, we've been talking about the future of water on this podcast series, and the future of water is, and we've left it purposely open-ended for you. What is the future of water in South Africa when you think about it?
Well, we know water is a basic human right. The future of water in South Africa is accessible and available to all South Africans.
Accessible and available. I love that, Anton. And for you, what the future of water is?
We're at the knife edge at the moment, and in terms of risk around water security, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and that's where plastics play a role. It's available. We have the capacity. I think we need to look at infrastructure projects, have a very focused approach to that, get political buy-in, and make sure that we introduce the proper systems in that. We've discussed the benefits. We've discussed that it's durable, a long life. It doesn't corrode. It doesn't rust, and it's lightweight. And you can have more water going through it, more cost effective, and so on. So that's the future. We need to think about water security and say, how do we secure that for ourselves, but also for our children?
I think a great point to end off on. And certainly I found it very informative, very educational to understand. I think the use cases and the applications through an industrial lens, one sees those benefits, and I think they're fairly obvious. The question now is, how do we change our approach towards plastics and think about using it far more responsibly, wisely, and with a view to building a more sustainable and circular economy. Avashnee, thank you very much for your time. Anton as well. It's been great having you here as part of the Safripol Water Security Engagement Forums. Great insights. We look forward to seeing how this progresses as we start to build out infrastructure that we so desperately need in the water sector. Take care.